Okay, welcome back to our digital persuasion class. We had to shift classrooms to work with some technology still waking up today. But nonetheless, we're going to continue an assignment that we started last time we met. And really, we fill the board with some are they or aren't they interesting figures from rhetorical history. And that is part one of what we're going to do back-to-back reports, rounds of reports where you, the student, go off, kind of research. I've got some materials I can send you, and then I want you to kind of find some additional ones out there on the scholarly webs, right? Utilize perhaps some of our library resources and things to find additional information. Siphon it down into what we call a crib sheet. That's a single page presentation sheet of just like some bulleted, almost outline style ideas and takeaways about said individuals, their impacts, and I'll put some driving maybe questions we want to be able to express about them on D2L, right? So a checklist of things like, be sure to offer us a little bit of information about this individual in this direction, that direction. And so we looked at some figures from what we can call classical history, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, through the end of the Roman Empire, the initiation of what historians call the Dark Ages into the Middle Ages, medieval Europe in particular, the Enlightenment era, and then the Renaissance, kind of rounded out by some figures that were existing and writing and philosophizing within the context of Victorian England as a framework, right? When the British Empire was kind of the dominant global culture, at least in terms of Western ideas. There were many other important things happening on other sides of the globe in different ways, and that are just as valuable. We just don't have time to fit all that in. So that we're going to draft from that, we asked everyone to take all those list of names home, consider them, and put together a kind of power ranking. Hey, what are three to five individuals that you'd prefer? And we'll do some drafting from that. But I want to expand today to talk a little bit about some voices from contemporary communication and rhetorical history, the history of rhetoric, and this could be considered a draft two list, assuming a shorter list, and to simplify our process, we're really going to draw names from 20th century, aka 1900s, right? 1900 to about 2000 or so, and within this period, we're going to have what we can call modern thinkers and their thoughts and ideas, their legacy on the field and so on. I'm going to draw most of those names from this book because we can consider this a resource that we can loan out, provide to you all to draw your notes upon, right? You can really simplify it by looking here. This is a maxim text in that way. Okay, so this book is, by name, it's saying exactly what we wanted to say: contemporary perspectives on rhetoric. All right, it's co-produced or not really produced, but edited / written by Sonia and Karen Foss, as well as Robert Trapp. All right, so a seminal text in some circles. And so we're going to just go through, list some of those names, and this is the beginning of seed planting. We're putting it on your radar to think about. I want to have everybody draw ultimately a single name here, but there's a limited number of names, so what we'll probably do is have you power rank maybe two names from this list. Most of these names you've never heard of. They mean nothing to you right now, but they play important roles. They're kind of some modern figures. Yes, I can't use the word foundational, but they help found contemporary ways that we think about and practice rhetoric and understand its values and why examining those ideas and values have virtue and value for us even into the 21st century, into 2023 and beyond. So let's take a gander at some names. I'm keeping it very simple today. We've already established the formula from our previous meeting together. Tragically, we did not record that session. There's some good bits coming out of it, but with so many out of pocket, we're going to go ahead and write some names on the board. All right, so here are some contemporary individuals that we want to think about and begin to associate their names with possible future crib sheet. Our second round of presentations in here, I believe. Okay, so the first name I'm going to put in, and I'm not really going to give us a full breakdown. I think these chapters do that. I don't want to step on what individuals students may cover in the future about them, but the first individual, I.A. Richards, is his name, and I.A. Richards is going to, kind of play this role in helping define. We always talk about the importance of defining key terms. He's going to define in his career span this term new rhetoric, right? This idea of like new ways to study things. And I do want to make a modern application, but I don't want to get lost in the weeds too long on that. When we think about what this question came to mind the other day. I was wrapping up. We had an evening class session, and I went home. And on one hand, I thought, oh yeah, there's maybe this. There's going to be this game on. I'm going to check in. I'm going to see what happens there a little bit. Turned on, activated screen in the home. And then I totally forgot, and then was thus prompted that the State of the Union address came on. And I thought, oh my goodness, this used to be a big deal. This used to be an event of considerable importance, and we've kind of watered that down and muddied its meaning over time, and social media really kind of makes everything ambiguous now. So it's hard to tell like what's important, why it's important, and so on. And then they got me thinking, well, it is still important, but I don't know if it's valuable yet to, say, even students, undergrad students. I get it. We're just not at that place in life where we've kind of been activated as citizens of viewing these things as significant. I go about my day. I watched the end of it. I listened to some commentary. I ended up staying up late, and then then went back and kind of caught up on some frivolous sports that should matter less than some of these people in positions of political importance. The next day, I'm moseying through social media, and I come across a video being shared that was like, can't believe they said this last night at the State of the Union. Right here, folks. I click on the video, and it was for all intents and purposes, a clip representing the State of the Union address, right? It's a presidential speech. It's in a chamber, right? And members of Congress present. Historically, very respectful affair. In recent years, a little bit more calamity, like some indiscretion from audience members in ways that people question its place. But so I'm watching this clip, and something kind of stark is presented. I can't remember exactly the wording, the phrasing. That's not the point. Point was that you saw this quote unquote opening remarks from the president that were bold and somewhat, we could consider it like outlandish. We could consider it almost inflammatory toward traditional American values. Think to yourself, whoa, what's happening here? Then some cuts to the audience, and he's getting unanimous, applause from members of both sides. First of all, you wouldn't see a lot of that kind of participation from in a bipartisan way, but especially the words that were uttered. And so this leads to the point, and I'll get to it, the video was what we call, give it a key term name, a deep fake, right? And it wasn't necessarily that it was AI manipulated facial software that's reconstituting an individual. It was that they were, the deliberate and strategic cuts and cutaways and mixture and remixture of speaker, audience response, and message were completely, like fabricated and presented in a different way. That's dangerous because, as we learned in a previous class, digital media literacy, of course, our ability to understand and distinguish between kind of real information and falsified, fabricated information is pivotal to functioning in a positive direction, to not being entirely coerced. Not to say we're not slightly coerced in different ways throughout life, but this was a significant sample, right? It was kind of like someone was creative license. I actually interpreted the sharer in the context of that share of a falsified piece of media as like cynical humor. That was my immediate takeaway based on the context in which I was encountering it. However, we know from recent history, a lot more people than me like to take in that kind of media and to be stirred up by it. Like take it at face value and then utilize we'll go ahead and classify it, fake news, right? Information that's falsified, and then absorb it as a kind of gospel truth and use it to kind of push their whatever agenda they have, right? Whatever bias that they're kind of loaded up and ready to kind of wage ideological war with, and occasionally something that crosses over into a different line altogether. So that piece of internet media that was falsifying a piece of political media that was mass communicated from a live thing to a primary, we can call it a virtual audience or a global audience, that reminded me, oh yeah, rhetoric's important, and the tools for determining little t truths about the world and discerning fact from fiction and so on matters. It's important. These are essential skills. For that reason, I was comforted and then kind of reinvigorated to say, not only does it add that emphasis back into a course like persuasion, or this offshoot we're calling digital persuasion, the social media age. That was certainly a piece of digital persuasion in the social media age, but it also adds value to why it's important to, hey, study some of those foundational voices, what they had to say, their contributions to the field. So Richard's primarily this idea of proposing new rhetoric in the world. Now, this next individual is actually coming out of, I mentioned the Enlightenment and Renaissance period, and part of that period included what was known as the Italian humanism movement. And I know a lot of that's Greek to you, but Ernesto Grassi is a name to come out of that. And so here is our next rhetorical scholar, we could call them, and someone on our draft board for the contemporary round of student presentations that we want to give. All right, so following up, we'll just keep moving right along. Got a few names I'm going to write down. Chamberlain is another name, and again, hey, these folks, they leave different kinds of legacies. All right, sometimes it's a little thing they're known for. Some thinkers have really prominent careers, and so for that reason, we consider it. In this, it's interesting. This individual is kind of linked with Lucy Obrick's, and so we're going to include those together. They're kind of like, a package deal in the context of the chapter that discusses them. Stephen Toulmin. Okay, now we might be, if you've ever cracked a book. This is a cat. What in the world kind of is happening with my handwriting here? Toulmin is a significant figure who popped up in a lot of basic course textbooks for a reason. He's going to introduce what will go on to be called the Toulmin model of communication, a very foundational way of theorizing about how humans communicate and so on. Similarly, Richard Weaver is a voice that will kind of write and theorize about what we call dialectics, and Weaver is going to have some counter positions of his own that that studiers of communication will really explore for a while. Now, here's one that's if you've been around me long, you've probably heard a quotation or two here and there. Kenneth Burke, quite a wily individual with some big ideas, right? And he was someone that was kind of like reinventing the wheel. That is to say, the wheel already existed. People are already calling it the wheel. But then Kenneth Burke says, you know what? Let me just name all the individual parts of the wheel and how it functions using my own terms, my own theoretical language set. And, for the most part, you can make a good case. People will let you do that. So Burke, a very interesting figure to consider there. All right, so where are we? Okay, I think we can shift over to the other side of the board now. Jurgen, yes, these are many of these European names, right? So we're seeing that European influence, not just a Western European, but a lot of thought coming out of that world. Habermas, all right. So Jürgen Habermas is going to have some kind of big C critical ideas about the world and how it works, why we should pay attention to structures and maybe the structure of politics and all of these things, and understand why it's one of the things we teach quite frequently in the undergrad setting is we practice a lot of media criticism, and we put it in the framework of, well, media criticism matters because we need to not just be passive consumers of all the various types of media that we encounter in the world, but we need to be we need to learn how to actively, critique, resist, or engage wisely, become active producers, even promoters of certain kinds of media. What does it mean to produce ethically sound media? And so when these older scholars write about value criticism, sometimes they're just putting it in a political context, like political speeches or political rhetoric or laws and things like that. And they might be critiquing, we could say, kind of some older systems of power and social influence and stuff. But we're often presenting it in a much more approachable and understandable way to say, hey, let's just take something like, I don't know, this big old explosive movie or this really famous book series that all the kids are reading, and let's kind of understand how it's doing the persuasive work it's doing. Like, why is it so entertaining and so on? And you say to yourself, it sounds like it's just a parlor trick, right? Oh, that's just the humanities kind of like barely hanging on, trying to stay relevant. But really, it's us applying some very classical models of critique and analysis, and using some contemporary artifacts to do so. So Jürgen Habermas, he's going to philosophize and theorize about what he calls the public sphere, right? So public sphere theory is going to be this big area that he hangs his hat on. Another scholar mentioned in here, if I'm not mistaken, sometimes if I don't have the information right in front of me in this digital age, it's like we train ourselves to not trust ourselves. Bell Hooks, I believe this individual just passed away. Bell Hooks, very prominent scholar of pedagogy, somewhat of a critical cultural scholar of what do you call it? Healthy resistance and critique of certain types of social systems, and very genteel in that way, right? A very eloquent individual and someone that has been alive enough, not unlike Habermas, in the modern setting of the world, to the point that we can find artifacts of them speaking publicly, sharing on documentaries, doing that kinds of work, whereas some of these earlier thinkers really just existed in an age before, certainly before, not just social media or internet, but even where it took a lot for an individual to gain access to television, right? So some of these people, they never got that close to that kind of media. You can only understand what they were about through their writings. But some of these later individuals, they survived long enough and lived late enough that they have this. You can locate some mediated presentations that they've given. Jean Baudrillard, this individual, not so many videos per se, but some brilliant ideas. I think there might be a couple of shards of something out there, but Baudrillard is this is a French thinker, and he's going to be theorizing about some really interesting things that have a lot of contemporary relevance. I believe he wrote a book, not Society of the Spectacle, that's Guy Debord, but he wrote a lot about what we call hyper reality, things that are more real than real, or the things that we kind of develop copies of copies to the point that we cannot recall their point of origin. So Baudrillard has some really interesting things to say, and is worth kind of thinking about. And then here's a figure that's, I mean, it's almost cliche to say controversial, because I mean, hey, if you're become a prominent enough of a name philosopher, you're going to court controversy. It's what you do. So this is another French thinker. Give some accuracy on the spelling here. Michel Foucault, and let's shift over here. Let us see on this side. He's going to have a lot to say and do and critique about power. He approaches it from a number of angles, like anyone that kind of lasts long enough in a field where they really build a career out of their criticisms and their public talks, their papers, their journal articles, their books, right, their full manuscripts. So these are our contemporary thinkers, right? So contemporary, that is to say, modern rhetoricians, right? We're talking about rhetorical history, that is to say, the history of persuasion and the thinkers that really lean into that mode of practice throughout their career. And so we're going to draw from this list, and I could add some others, but I would just be cherry picking. We could go ultra contemporary, the ones still teaching today, still churning out books, but that has become such a pluralized field, and there can be some, we just don't have the time, right? And that's not really our purpose, is to kind of like, plug our amps in and then just, do some rock star mimesis here with that, right? And just kind of almost show preferential treatment even through the selection process. But here are some organized contemporary minds on it. And so this will represent a second list that we draft from for our student presentations, our mini crib sheet style presentations, where we go and do some background work on a thinker, come back, organize information about it, present it to the group as a whole, and we're gonna speed up that process. We're all gonna learn together by sharing information, whereas we wouldn't have time if we simply, tried to hit these one at a time. We'd run out of weeks, we'd run out of dates. And so we have that on deck, and it's exciting to announce as early as next Thursday, we'll have our first guest lecture. We're going to bring them in virtually. They're going to talk to us about one of those classical areas. So in some ways, they're going to give us a demo of maybe what we're going to do. What's expected of you all is certainly at a lesser stakes level than probably the scale of what we would encounter with the guest speaker. But this can be a fun way to engage in mixing up some, kind of like the history of these figures and why they matter. And ultimately, this is just helping give us foundations of understanding the history of rhetoric, history of people studying persuasion, thinking about it, writing about it. And that's going to help us equip ourselves to then be able to go out, strike out our own individual persuasive project. Of course, much more to come on that. But then our group project that is going to culminate in a campus presentation this semester where we're going to collectively work together to present some exciting ideas and make our own persuasive case. In the meantime, some figures to be looking out for and studying. I put the table of contents and cover of this book in our shared folder, so you can at least re-see that. If these names a little bit unclear, there was a discrepancy the other day about whether or not the settings on our Zoom and in-class camera are projecting backwards, are like inverting the lens so that you can't actually read when you take in the media. And so if that's the case, we have the first pages of this in our shared readings folder online, and we'll look forward to kind of studying these more together. Sound good? That's the plan for the upcoming set of weeks, and we'll pick back up. We'll make firm those decisions by next Tuesday. And the next Thursday, I have a little bit of time in between with the guests coming in to talk to us a little bit. And then soon after that, we'll start to kind of present on some of those figures. All right. And that's where we will go for the near future. And just to plant a seed, on March 7th, there's a time conflict. March 7th. The Board of Trustees is going to be in town. There are going to be a series of presentations, which I'm invited to also participate in. It's going to conflict with our class time. So March 7th, we can already think about this in advance. We won't meet. March 9th, however, I do have a second guest speaker going to join us virtually and talk about putting rhetorical or persuasive strategies into not just a contemporary setting. He's going to talk to us about how they use it in their professional work, and they happen to work at a very high level in higher education at a large college. So we're gonna hear from them, learn about that, and that'll be an important way to strengthen our understanding of why does this matter, like what are we doing again, as we move through the course